Good morning, everyone. Welcome to American Scouser's morning coffee or tea with American Scouser. It's Monday. Grumpy is in the house, and I have the coffee here. And with us, as always, is the Polish Prince, who has.
There was nothing to ruin this weekend, so we can enjoy this in peace.
There was nothing to ruin this weekend, actually. Yeah, I didn't watch the game. Only watched the Fenerbahce game yesterday. That's pretty much like the most of the soccer I watched. I caught up with a lot of stuff with the late night YouTube black hole that I occasionally dive into in terms of highlights and things that were said and stuff like that. Kind of got caught up with everything that way. Alan with us as always. Good morning. He says it's freaking chilly here at 40 degrees. I have no idea. I only opened the door for these two guys over here to come out. It was chilly, but I closed the door right
40,
back. So
I can tell you that.
Yeah, the weekend was definitely rough. Layla's game even got canceled for like Saturday and stuff like that. So rough. But we're almost there, I think, right? It's fucking March 20th.
Technically, tomorrow's the beginning of spring, right? So
yes,
we should be in the clear.
By the way, it's March 20th. It's this guy's birthday right here. Stitch's birthday. Don't ask me how old he is. I think he's 8 now. So has seen a lot of good Liverpool days and some bad days. Leo has no idea about the history of the club and our recent run over here. So he's learning slowly but surely. Okay, so some weird stuff to get to over the weekend. I guess let's do this first. After all that is said and done this weekend, the standings. I'm thinking, when we were looking at the standings before and we were talking about Arsenal, City, and stuff like that, my biggest thing with Arsenal was the fact that they were going to play Thursday games. Is the fact that they got eliminated out of that ordeal the best thing that could happen to them in terms of a title run? Because now that is totally off the books.
Yeah, their entire focus is on the Premier League. And even when they were playing Thursday games, they were still winning on the weekend. So it's not like at that point it was taking too much away from them. I know as the season goes on to get a bit more leggy and that kind of, you can see a bit more of that, the stamina gone, a bit more of that endurance gone. But I think now that they are just solely focused on the Premier League, that fully focused, in this term, what that means essentially is that Arsenal's going to win the league. And it's a very weird thing to say. If you were to tell me 2 or 3 years ago that Arsenal would win the league in 2 or 3 years, I'd call you a madman. I wouldn't believe you.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of amazing to see what Arteta has been able to do with that club. From the beginning moments and the rough tenure he had to being backed by not a lot of people, not being backed by a lot of his fans, to be able to turn all that around is pretty great stuff. So I think because of no more Europa, they're going to be absolutely fine. They'll be able to rotate a little bit if they need to, but I don't know if they'll need to. I know that they don't have the most depth in the league, but they have a decent amount of depth. And you can bring in guys like Jorginho and Trossard off the bench. I mean, those aren't nothing players. Those are decent rotation guys in any situation.
Yeah, I think my whole thing with the Thursday was the fact that, in the first rounds, you can just kind of rotate the hell out of what you want on Thursday, and you're playing with much inferior opposition, so you could get away with that. As you advance in the Europa, the teams are getting better and better. Fenerbahce just got eliminated to Sevilla, for example, but like Juventus isn't that. Like, you're going to play against better teams, but you're not going to be able to rotate half the starting 11 and still get a win and then have your guys fresh for the weekend. So eliminating that was like my biggest thing, is when those Thursday tough games come about, it's going to be harder and harder for Arsenal to kind of keep up. But now, kind of like the tables have turned, I know they still, if City wins the game on hand, it's still only 5 points and they do play each other still. But I think City still going in the Champions League and against like a tough matchup on top of that, where that's what they really want, especially like for Pep, I would think, and even the players, you would think that's what they really want. If you gave him right now the Champions League title and finishing the league third, even they would be all over that. I think they would not care. So I think that's going to be a huge title decider. Let's see if Arsenal can keep it going. It's odd because when you watch Arsenal, you look at a fixture, you can see Arsenal stumbling a lot more than City stumbling, but they've been able to win games one way or the other. And that's kind of like what a title winning team does, really find ways to win games.
Yeah, I think I have a really close Arsenal friend, and as soon as that Reece Nelson goal went in, kind of just texted back and forth and was like, that's the title defining moment right there.
Yeah.
You know, you need those moments. Like for us, it was probably the Sadio Mane header against Villa, right? That comeback there, that was the moment where you look at it and you go, this is what decides the title right here, is that moment exactly. Because if they drop that game against Bournemouth, who knows what happens after that? You know, that morale could be totally shot. So that after that goal, I felt like that was the moment where before, you know, we talked about, yeah, Arsenal could win the league still. And then we had a little bit of a rough patch. Like, okay, maybe if they do find, like you were saying, if they're able to rotate enough guys, if they're able to have enough, enough wherewithal to be in playing well on the weekends, then they could get to that point. And then after that Reece Nelson goal went in, I just felt like that was it. That was what they needed for the rest of the year, essentially.
I think so. I mean, this kind of like really opens the door for them. I mean, it's still too early, but I thought initially it was like, I can't believe they got bumped out of Europa like that. But then, looking at it this weekend, I was like, that could have probably been like a really good thing that happened for them at the end of the day. But let's talk about finding ways to lose games and talk about this ordeal over here from the weekend. And I think this is going to take us to some manager conversation over here.
Yeah, so this is a clip from the Fulham United FA Cup game here. This is just an alternate angle. They showed this later on in the broadcast. You can see up here, it's 90th minute already, so this had happened 18 minutes beforehand. But this is what Marco Silva did, and it's what he gets carded for. And then we see what Mitrovic did.
C'est le règlement, c'est voilà pourquoi elle a été installée aussi un VAR. Le coup d'épaule de Mitrovic.
So here's the thing. Let's start from the beginning, right? Let's start with the whole Willian thing. I think it's a clear penalty. And because it's a clear penalty, I think it's a red. I know, like, there was some discussion, for example, on the Discord channel, what can he do with his arm? The way I see that is he sees the ball going in, and he tries to, kind of like move his body towards it. I mean, we're talking about it like right before we went on air. And I've been there, done that, where you kind of like try to move your body to block the ball. And without intentionally doing it, your arm is kind of going that way too. So right. I feel like his arm is going towards the ball. And it's just kind of like a reflex thing where you're trying to reach for the ball and his arm... See, like he just kind of like does that thing at the end, and that's something that you do out of reflex. He could raise that arm, he could put that arm behind him, whatever. I mean, probably putting it behind his heart because he's doing the knee, but because he's raising the knee, it's just like a reflex thing, like something falling off the table, you reaching for it, kind of an ordeal. Or I was telling you before, I think as a soccer person, and only people who play soccer can probably relate to this, I tend to try to catch things with my foot a lot. And at times it has been things that I probably should not have tried to catch with my foot. It was not realistic nor healthy for my foot, kind of an ordeal, like to soften the blow, like you were saying, right, when we went before air. Yep. And this is like softens the blow, but blows your toe up at the same time. I feel like this is a similar incident where his hand is going towards the ball.
Yeah, this isn't a case where it's in the box and he doesn't know anything about the ball. This isn't him falling on the ball and hitting it with his hand. This is him moving toward the ball and his hand making contact with the ball. I don't care that his hand is near his body. He's making a move toward the ball, toward essentially trying to block it from going to the goal, and it hits his hand. I don't know how there is an argument against it. I think it's one of the more clear, besides Luis Suarez's handball against Ghana. There's not much else that you can really argue against here. I know he's trying to tuck his arm in, but he's still hitting it with his hand while moving toward the ball. If he was jumping away from the ball and trying to tuck his arm in, I understand that argument to an extent, but he is moving toward the ball, and that's the most important thing is the intent behind it. He's moving toward the ball. And I know I've said those three words like 10 times now. I think that's the only thing that matters is that he's moving toward the ball. That's it.
And I think, yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Like I say, it is reflex. Is it intentional? Maybe it's not intentional because it's a reflex at the end of the day. But he's moving the body. You can see he's raising the knee. He's doing everything he can to kind of like get his body to where the ball is, and therefore his hand goes there too. And I think at that point, you take the red card, and you're going to be down to 10. Okay, the game is going to be tied. I think the biggest thing there was, you're losing Willian. I mean, I'm not saying in terms of a player, but you're losing a winger. It's not the end of the day. It's a lot easier to adjust to that as opposed to, I don't know, losing a center back or something like that towards the end of the game. I don't know if they had to use their subs or whatever. But from what I understand, and we'll get to that when we get to the Silva part, but this was more frustration was not necessarily this and what happened here. The frustration was more because of the calls that were missed earlier, where they should have gotten a call themselves and gone up to 0, and they did not. So you don't get that, then you get this. It becomes an issue. But this one, the first red, I think we agree that it's a red. It should be a red. It is what it is. It's not maybe intentional, but either way, your hand is moving towards the ball. I'll say it for you so you don't have to.
Thank you. Then that is all.
So the Mitrovic.
Yes.
I mean, that is an awesome, like an obvious one as well. And I think the issue with this one, again, comes back to what Fernandez did. What was that? 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and shoving the linesman out of the way.
Yeah. And they talked about the FA is going to look into it and give him a possible lengthier ban on this. And I think at least from what I've seen, people have argued that it's a different situation. It's not getting into the face of the main referee and kind of grabbing him. It was just a push, and that's the big thing between both of them is how much, I guess, what is the amount of assault within it? Is it a pull? Is it a push? Is it a grab? And while I think, we all were really frustrated seeing Bruno do that, and we all thought that he should have at least received some sort of, maybe not a ban, but some sort of like a fine, $20,000, whatever the case, something to be like, hey, this sort of thing is not allowed, and this is why. And then
some acknowledgments.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So then, to rumors about getting 7 to 9 games for something like this does seem really harsh when you compare it to that. But then at the same time, that's also going to set a very good precedent for this kind of stuff shouldn't be allowed. I know that the refereeing can be bad, but it's no excuse to grab an official and then get in his face like that. I think what needs to also be done is you need to see more refs not be scared to give yellows to players who are swarming him all the time, because that will then also keep that at bay too, because it's getting worse and worse in the Premier League when you watch the swarming. Like, it feels like a League 2 team in South America or something, where it's constant just swarming and swarming and swarming. And that's the captain's duty, is to talk to the official there. And there has to be some sort of precedent set to then have to follow.
So that's the thing. I mean, Sparky says you touch an official, you should get a red. And I think it goes back to, I don't think Fernandez one should have been a red, for example. That was probably more of a yellow in my eyes, but it should have been acknowledged one way or the other. This one is more intimidation on top of everything too. And yes, I agree. You let this go, like with a yellow or nothing, or ignore it. I mean, what is next? Like, you're going to show a red when you get punched? I mean, this is like, you want to set an example of this. What I don't understand is, I mean, first of all, yes, losing your head. Hey, I am the last freaking guy, and I hate to say this. I don't like saying this, but I'm the last guy to preach about losing your head and, like trying to control and composure and stuff like that. Because sadly, as easygoing as I am over here, I got to go into a different personality as I play. A guy I don't necessarily like as much, but it is what it is. That's what basically happens. It's like my alter ego when I'm on the field, and I might not been able to control it in this scenario after what happened. So while these guys are still professionals and stuff like that, it's probably even worse to put that much effort into something being taken away from you if we're angry in front of the TV. Regardless, like Sparky says, and like Alan says Mitrovic sticking an elbow into the ref is a disgrace. And then we'll get to the Silva thing next. So Silva is well outside his area and gives dogs abuse to the ref. They both need big fines, up to 10 game bans, and in future pointed actions. Examples must be set, especially the grassroots games. I do not agree with this one. Here's what I do not agree
Very
with.
harsh.
I don't know what he said. And he's saying that, when I watched the post-match, he basically said, I would love to see the reports to see what he said. Like the referee says that Silva said to him to get this red card, because Marco is saying pretty much he didn't really say anything that would warrant a red card. Here's what I don't like about this is this shit happens all the freaking time. And this is a power trip red card to me, as opposed to, like trying to control it. He's not showing this red card if the game was at Fulham Stadium, if it was in London, first of all. And I feel like, the leaving the box thing, Klopp is all over the place. Pep is all over the place. Arteta is all these guys all over the place.
Arteta is never in his box.
Yes. I mean, they don't get any cards. To me, this one is more like a power trip red card. Like, I've had enough of your guys bitching red card. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Again, it's going to come down to hearing what he said to him, because if there is something specific that was said that would warrant it, I will understand that. But because we only have what we're able to see, and not very good at lip reading, and I don't think we'll be able to see much of what is just sent off is what I saw.
Subscribe to American Scouser, I think is what he said.
Okay,
I'm not very good at it either.
It must be, it's a bit of the accent. I think the Scouser's coming off weird, but I can see it though. I can see it. I see your point.
With a little bit of Portuguese. The accent is making it hard to read the lips. Yeah,
it's just like any Scouser thing, right? It's all about the accent. It's fine. So yeah, and I think so. It'll really come down to what was said, and like Marco Silva, we want to know what was said because we want there to be some sort of transparency. I think it goes back to just the entire VAR process. Is we're not going to be so upset with VAR if we have the transparency to understand why certain decisions were made. If you have transcripts, if you have the possibility to hear what the communication was, like, okay, you saw that, you see this is what happened, X, Y, Z, make the call this way, fine. We've seen that in different sports. We've seen that tried out in different leagues too, of having the actual communication so we know what's going on. And so this is another one of those moments where transparency is going to be huge, because you're right. If this was at Fulham and this was the roles were flipped, do we see Erik ten Hag getting sent off? I don't know. Is the profile also of the manager something to consider too when considering this sort of situation? Because I don't know if we see the opposite happening if it's at Fulham and Ten Hag is the one that's upset and going into Chris Kavanagh's face. So I feel like it is definitely a power trip and not something that was managed very well. I don't understand why it couldn't have just been at least just a yellow, like, hey, get back in your box. Leave me alone. This is the call we have to make.
And then if he keeps going, then show the red.
Right, and you do the other yellow, because that's a yellow. It's a caution, right? That's the whole point of it, is because someone did something that was past a certain degree of what's allowed, but it's not worthy enough to send them completely off the pitch. And this is one of those situations where, yeah, he stepped out of line, but stepped out of line like 10 yards past the yellow card into the red card territory. It doesn't make sense.
Unless he said something, I'm just going off of how confident he was in the post-match interview in terms of like not having said anything that would warrant it. Having said that, I've been in situations where you're going ape shit and you don't really remember exactly what you said. You kind of like remember the gist of it, but you don't remember everything that you said. And that's the thing. I understand, like, okay, you want to set a precedent. I know what, Alan is saying. Yeah, you want to set an example, grassroots games and stuff. First of all, I don't think you can compare it to the grassroots games, but I understand what he's saying. These guys are actually like professional and, upper level. They should be able to keep composure, but I would argue that the stakes are a lot higher too. So yeah, like I say, I'm the last guy to judge people on letting the emotions get the best of them during a game and during the heat of the moment and stuff. But like it goes back to what you were saying about the players. Some stuff gets, I think, and this is going to happen, obviously, based on the ref and what they have go and stuff like that. But you see, if he said, like, this is fucking bullshit, let's say, is that a red card? Because how many times have we lip read people or players saying, oh, fuck off, or something like that after a call? You know how many
It's
times
Hendo
I
20 times
after
a
like
day.
making a foul, and then
Yeah.
the call, you know, what I don't think is a foul, and it gets called, and I'm like, oh, fuck off. And as you walk around, you walk back, it's, I mean, it's what I don't want to say it's what you do, but it's what I do. You know, like it's what most players do. How many times have you lip read Robertson swearing and that, you know, Milner swearing and stuff like that? So the pick and choose moments is what actually gets to me. Like, oh, okay, well, this got on my nerves, so I'm gonna take an action here. The other one was fine. I'm gonna kind of ignore it because it's part of the game. You know, Sparky says passion is a part of the game, and I agree to that. It is really hard to control yourself sometimes. Should you be able to? Yes, but like I say, I'm the last guy to preach the Mitrovic thing. Yeah, and I know, like I say, it can get to you. I just feel like I don't understand the swarming thing these days because it's going to VAR. So you getting on top of the guy over there, if I was playing in this day and age, I'd probably like go watch that shit. It'd be like the NBA thing. They're constantly guys like motioning. It would be like, you know, just go watch this shit. You're gonna see. Just go watch it, and I will walk away because it's gonna be seen there what happened. I feel like they're swarming more now. While like VAR is watching, you're like yelling at the guy who's waiting for basically a phone call.
And then swarming after the decision is made, which in theory you shouldn't be able to argue against because that's the reason why they took the time to make the call, because they're supposed to be making the right call. I know sometimes it doesn't work that way, but if there is a VAR check and that happens, there is no other reason to swarm because that is the time that they took to make that call. And so in those cases specifically, if like swarming after a VAR ruling should just be straight yellows for everyone who's coming up to the referee because it doesn't look good. It's a frustrating thing to watch. And like you said, I know passion is just like Sparky Parky. I know passion is part of the game, but it's one of those things where there has to be a little bit of integrity and respect for everyone that's part of the game. I know we can sit here and complain about the referees a ton, but they still have to be, at the end of the day, they have to be respected a little bit because there are only going to be so many of them that are going to want to do this job. And so, you know, you need to have people that can still do it. And there should be something set and a precedent set for just these pretty much childish antics that keep going on whenever a call is made.
Dom says, good morning, by the way, Dom. Personally, I don't think Manchester-born referees should be officiating any Manchester team's games, and Kevin, I was the ref in that Rodri handball incident. Yeah, I agree to that. It's just very hard for them. What happens, and I know this from the Turkish league, is when then clubs start dictating or constantly expressing, we don't want this guy reffing our games. And what eventually happens is, yes, you don't have anybody. Now you have some bozo who's never reffed any games, reffing your games. Now you're a victim of inexperience instead, kind of an ordeal. But I do agree that they can probably do a better motion of it. Sparky says, only person to talk to the ref should be the captain, just like rugby, give everyone else yellows who approach the ref. And yes, and you know, here's the thing, though. Sadly, I was the captain. So
you get all the leeway. You can yell as much as you want.
But here's the thing. I mean, I think you can go talk to the ref when there's a difference between like kind of like the heat of the moment ordeal, right? Like you make a foul, you get a call, you're like, oh, fuck that, you know. But then there's like another thing, you know, when you go approach the ref about something like, why did that guy get a yellow card? There, you let that call go, whatever the case might be. That's when you're having a conversation. I agree with Sparky there. I mean, yeah, I remember, when he pushed the ref to the ground and got an 11-game ban. So that's why, like 7 to 9, I don't know. I guess automatic red is like a straight red is automatically 3, right? 3 games anyway. So I thought this would be like 5 games or something like that. And I understand why they would want to, you know, send them a message. So let's go back to the Silva thing, because this is another thing I want to ask. because I see in the post match they're asking him, they're like, you lost your composure and stuff like that. Don't we want a manager or what kind of a manager do you want, Mateusz? Do you want a guy who's going to show emotion there and maybe fucking lose it, right? I mean, it gets praise in the U.S. Where they said, like, oh, you got a technical, to get the team going and stuff. It happens in NBA and stuff like that all the time.
Yeah.
What kind of a manager? I mean, would you rather have your manager keep his composure and turn back and not say anything to the ref? Or do you want somebody like Silva who's going to be like, this is fucking bullshit?
No, I think you want someone who's going to be on your side and to show that emotion, show that passion. But it's tough because you look at someone like Ancelotti, who's incredibly successful, and he never changes his face during the course of 90 minutes. But you can sit there and say he's a fantastic manager. He's someone that I would love having managing my team because he's able to do this and that. But in certain moments, especially when you feel like your players are feeling a lot of it, you want to feed off of that too, and you want to give it back in a way. You want it to come kind of bounce back and forth between you guys. Because if you have like a completely dead squad with a completely dead manager, there's not much to bounce off of. Or if you have one that's really high and one that's not, you might not be able to balance that very well, depending on who it is. So I would want to see my manager fired up like that. I don't know, in his press conference, he said something about Mitrovic needing to control his emotions. I feel like, if anything, that was probably the wrong way to go, because he didn't even mention his own red card at all, I think, in the press conference. But he's talked about how, Mitrovic should control his emotions, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, all right, well, you got the red card first, technically. So then so you have to understand the situation, too, that it's not completely down to Mitro that, you also got the red card. You also showed a bit of your emotion, but it's not necessarily something that I would hate to see.
So you would rather have him, if you're a Fulham guy, you'd rather have this.
I think so.
Getting the red card at the end of the game, as opposed to kind of like saying, guys, calm down. I don't know. It's a tricky one.
I think I would want to, because I don't think he deserved the red card. Because if he does that maybe 8 out of 10 times in any other situation, it's a yellow. And I think that's fine. And the game goes on. The team moves on, whatever the case. Mitro might still get his red because he might still be really pissed off. But at least Silva's still there. So I think majority of the time he gets a yellow, and I'm totally fine with that. But because this is how it ended up, it's tough to say, because it's all about what the consequence was. If the consequence was red, I don't want that. If the consequence is yellow, I'm all for it. I think that's where I stand. And it's kind of unfortunate because it's not necessarily a consistent thought for me. I can't sit here and say yes, yes, yes. I think it's all based on consequences, which is tough.
I think, I thought about this because I wanted to ask you, and I thought about it. I think I want my manager to do this. I do want my manager to do this. Like, especially after what happened, I do want my manager to do this. It's like, I want my manager to show some emotion. Is it professional? No. Should he probably be a lot more calmer? Yeah. But I mean, honestly, I don't know what he said here, but there's freaking nothing there. He got 5 feet past the white line. Get the hell out of here. Like, he came over there and say, you know what, whatever. I mean, unless he said something there specifically, which he claims he did not say anything to warrant a red. And like I say, even if he says something, like I just mentioned it, like, people say fuck off all the time when he makes a call. And he says, like, you let that fucking go, and now you're doing this. He walks away. That's why I feel like this is a forward trip.
I feel like we have seen worse from Klopp against the referee. We have seen worse from Pep. We have seen worse from Arteta. We have seen worse from Conte. And again, I think this is one of those things that might go back to just the degree of the manager and their reputation, or not the reputation, but necessarily the hierarchy, right? You kind of, it might go back to some, when we talk about possibly NBA or even some football players, they have a reputation, right? Like Xhaka has this red card reputation where if he goes in for a tackle, people automatically assume it's worse than anyone else going in for that tackle because he has that reputation. And so, and some people get away with it. And I don't think that's necessarily, you would want everything to be criticized for everyone being the same kind of person, whether they are world class or whether they are Sunday league. You know, you want the rules to be rules for a reason. You don't want anyone to be above that.
That's the thing. I think the media afterwards twists it based on the characters involved and based on the results that comes out of it.
That too.
I was just reading it this weekend, so there's much madness going on, obviously, here in the U.S. I'm not a big college basketball fan, but you know, it's sports. It's on. If it's competitive, I'm gonna watch upsets, whatever. You know,
yeah.
It's March Madness.
March Madness is great.
Yeah. But I saw something on like Instagram. I think it was like from ESPN or Bleacher Report, whoever it was. But they were showing like two basketball players, like two college kids, getting into it on the court. They're like yelling at each other and stuff like that. And they're like, and they won the game afterwards. And then it's like, and the end line was like the passion to win. So because they won the game, that ends up being passion to win. If they didn't win the game, it'd be like losing their heads.
That is where they lost the game.
Yes. Yeah. That's when the game was lost, when they turned on each other and stuff. When they win, it's like the passion to win. You're pushing each other towards the win and stuff. So you can twist it any way you want. And I agree. It is Marcos de Silva. And now, like, unfortunately, this sticks to it. I think there are certain managers that would get this. Ten Hag, who looks like the guy who just like walked in. He's actually in charge of the grass or something like that. That's kind of how he carries himself. Is the turf okay? You know, and then so he comes out. He probably would not get this. But I think some of the other managers, like if it's Mourinho or somebody like that, they would maybe get it because, like you're saying, they have the reputation. They're like, oh, here he goes again. And then it's like the red card. But I thought that was kind of bullshit. And I think like this is exactly what I think. I agree with Sparky here. If they're going to give them long-term bans, they have to be more consistent if cars in other games. And that's my thing. You can't just pick and choose where you're going to send the message. Send the goddamn message all the time and not just pick and choose your moments. But I thought that's why I wanted to kind of see what you would want from your manager, which brings us to the next one over here. Speaking of managers, kudos to Sky Sports to find two freeze moments where I watched this press conference.
That happened for like a split second twice.
Like, if you didn't watch the press conference, you would think he was constantly yelling or something like that. But actually, it was a very good, like the head of the mafia, if you don't work for us, we shoot you, kind of a talk. And what do you make of it? He basically ultimately threw the team under the bus, saying, without really going full Italian, he basically called the team, these guys are losers. Like they kind of have like a loser mentality, not a winner mentality, without officially saying it.
He pretty much did the it's Tottenham lads, like did that while not saying it, but doing it a lot kinder than you would expect that sort of saying to come out. And you know what? To an extent, I think he's absolutely right. For 20 years, they've had the same owner and they've had similar players stay throughout the club. You have the likes of Kane, Son, Dyer, Højbjerg, Lloris, and they haven't won anything, but they've changed managers 18, 19 times, whatever the case might be. And managers, they do get blamed more than the players do, but somehow the players tend to always be excused. And it depends on which players too, because sometimes players take the big brunt of it. But if you're up 3-1 with 15 minutes to go, and then you're on the pitch walking and huffing and puffing and not accepting responsibilities, and that doesn't always fall back on the manager. It's not Conte's fault. They kind of just lost it all in the last 15 minutes. It's not that he changed his tactics and made them go super offensive, with 15 minutes left when they're up 3-1. They've played the same the whole year. They play defensively regardless. It's not like they're going to suddenly go out and try to attack at will. And so I think I don't disagree with anything that he said, because while he said that, managers do sometimes deserve the criticism, you have to also criticize the club and the players if they need criticizing. That's pretty much what I got from it when it comes down to it, is you have to criticize the parties involved and not solely focus always on the one thing. It's always been the manager at Tottenham. It's never been anything else. It's always been the manager, and they've had the money and they've had the players. And you know, when you have that much money, you can bring in players and it's tough.
Yeah, I am kind of torn on this as I was listening to him. It is hilarious, by the way, because I find it funny that Conte, who's been around forever, still speaks English like, you know, this is like the third time he's speaking an awesome Italian accent, and it just sounds like a mafia meeting than a press conference. I just love like listening to the dude. And I know if it wasn't Conte saying this, maybe if it was Silva or somebody like this saying this, he would probably get less of a reaction because, you know, we want the managers to be honest, but then we want the managers to be correct, like politically correct at the same time, back in their team and stuff like that. I mean, Sparkus says, check please, he's on the way out. But I mean, yeah, he loved it. I loved it as well. And I think like he's almost like trying to get fired at this point. It's like that Seinfeld episode where Costanza is doing anything and everything possible to get fired. But at the same time, don't we want this honesty? So let's go to this one. If this is your manager, do you want to hear like Klopp, especially like during this bad run, have one of these? Maybe not to this extreme, because I mean he did literally call them out and say they have a losing mentality. And here's the thing: he never said it's not my fault; it's the player's fault. He basically said everybody should get the blame, like you're saying. It should be more divided as opposed to
the pie that you guys talk about on Monday nights.
Yeah,
you know, the pie should be more equal.
Yes. And I think, yeah, it should be equal. And I don't know, like, I think he made it sound like this is what I got out of it, especially towards the end of the press conference, that, you know, this is the way it goes. He almost made it sound like the ownership coddles the players. And you don't know what's happening behind the scenes for him to say that. Is he going at some of these guys who are running to Levy and saying like, Conte's yelling at me? They're like, Antonio, stop, let him be. You know, I don't know. Is that happening behind the scenes? Like a mom, dad thing, like going to complain to mom when dad yells at you? Or because that's what it made it sound like. And I haven't watched the full show, but when Mourinho was there, they had the Amazon thing.
Yep.
And I felt like it was an owner that was around almost too much.
But then that gets in a conversation I mean, don't you want an owner that's involved? You know, we sometimes, you don't want to see the owner near the club?
No, I don't.
No? Oh, because I guess, I mean, this is something where
here's the thing. Involved in what the hell you're supposed to do, not involved in what the manager is supposed to do. If I am a manager,
I meant more so
and
physically.
The district manager is always in my fucking area, in my fucking location, who are you going to go to when anything that happens? Who's going to look in charge? It's going to be the district manager that looks in charge. You know, let you put me in charge to manage this joint. Let me do my thing. If there's a problem, then come in. But let me do my thing the way, you know, you obviously paying me shitloads of money, mind you, to do this. So I don't want the ownership there, because I think that's when you're bringing two heads as opposed to having, like, if you look at Liverpool, Klopp is the man. There's nobody else. Like, if Klopp gets on your case, Klopp benches you, blah, blah, there is nobody to run to and talk to during lunch or blah, 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 because the owner happens to be there, like put a word in his ear and stuff. That's what I mean in that sense. Like, I don't want him around and involved.
Gotcha. I think what I was kind of thinking of in my mind was I'd rather have an owner that is around the club physically, maybe not to the extent of that you're saying, right, where they are a shoulder for the players to cry on, essentially. But I'd much rather have them physically around than to have them completely always absent and you never see them, right? And I think that also depends on how the team is performing. If the team isn't performing well, the owner's never anywhere to be seen and things are going to shit, like, I would want to see the owner around at that point, because to me it feels like he cares enough to want to be there. But there is a level of degree where I don't want him to involve. Like you said, there shouldn't be two heads, right? You hire people to do a specific job. If you don't trust that person to do that job, don't have that person do that job. That's what it should be like. And unless you are yourself going to manage this club, from the day to day on the field, then you shouldn't be part of that. You should be part of your responsibility. So I do agree with you there, but I do think that there should be a physical representation of ownership to a certain extent, somewhat available for, I mean, it doesn't have to be the whole season, but have to be present in a way and not completely distant and not there.
Yeah, see, I know what you're saying, but that's like a really, really thin line, isn't it? Like to be seen, but not to be, like Sparky says, owner to be seen, never heard on day-to-day running of the team. And I think if you're there by your presence, I understand what you're saying. Like if it's a poor run of form or whatever, I do want the manager to come down and say, hey guys, we believe in you, blah, blah, blah. This is the man right here. With his leadership, you guys put in the work. We're going to go to the right place. Adios. You know, like, you guys need anything? No, everything is good. Trust this guy. He's the man. He's going to lead you guys there. I'll see you guys later. And then leave. Because if you're sticking around there and going from like guy to guy and it's like, what can we do to make you feel better? Then you're kind of like taken away from my authority as the manager, because there's another guy going around that's right in charge. And that's what I would not want that as a manager, first of all. Especially, here's another thing, like if I'm a guy like Conte, I've been around, won this, won that, you know, you give me this job, you're getting paid a lot of money, man. You want full authority and you don't want anybody else to even question it. Probably your ego demands that anyway. I mean, you got to figure you blew up an ego over these years.
Yeah, and he's that type of manager that needs all of that control. There are some managers who don't need that kind of control, but him, like Mourinho, those are guys that want to come in. They want to change the culture of the club. They want to change everything. And I think when you've had the same owner for 20 years and you've had the same players there, the same main players, right? The same core guys there for 7, 8, 9 years, it's very difficult to go in and change that culture. And I think part of that is where there's a lot of heads butting, is because Conte wants everything to be changed into his specific image. And all of these guys who have been through several managers are like, well, we're just kind of us. You know, we want to just be what we are.
How we roll.
It's Tottenham, lads. Like, that's just what we are. Like, you can't make us be anything else. And so I think part of that, it lends itself to a bit of the dynamic of their at between Levy and Conte. And I mean, we talk about this, they're still in fourth, you know, it's not like they're in 8th, 9th, 10th, you know. Conte in his press conference is like, we're battling for 8th or for 7th. Like, what are we fighting for? 7th, 8th place? And you guys are in 4th place. You know, you're still in a Champions League spot. There's of course 12, 13 games to go for some. But it's not like they're having such a terrible season where they're out of any European spots whatsoever.
But that's what I love about it, because to Conte, that's the same shit.
Right.
And that's what I really, I mean, as a, you know, if I'm a Tottenham fan, I want to hear that from my manager. 4th and 7th is the same shit to me, because I want to be first. I want to win. If you're like, and I think that's what he's almost like talking about, like these guys are okay with being 3rd and 4th, and they don't want to take that extra step to be the 1st and 2nd. And that's why with this attitude, you guys will, I think pretty much was saying, this is why you guys never win shit. You will always be 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th.
You'll always settle.
You have, and you almost don't want that pressure that Arsenal and City have now, because this is much more cozier being there and then qualify for the Champions League and stuff like that. And I think here's another thing, like you're bringing Conte into a situation where shit hasn't been working. So you want to change. So if you're going to still hang around and do the same shit you were doing, well, nothing's going to fucking change. And it isn't. And 20 years now, you haven't won shit. So obviously something has to be changed. Something has to be done differently. And you're not letting him. And I think this is the same exact reason. Well, I know, I mean, they brought Ten Hag in now, and he has been successful because they kind of given him more tools. But at United, this is why they did not want to go after Conte when he was available, because this is the kind of manager he is. He's going to call it as he sees it. He doesn't give a fuck. So, and yeah, it will be interesting. So what do you think will happen? So do you think he goes? Or if you're Levy right now, do you fire this guy? Or do you actually finally say, sadly, he's right?
That's so difficult, because it's pretty much, they're just waiting to see who blinks first between both of them. And he only has 3 months left in his contract. So I personally see him there throughout the end of the year. I don't think Levy necessarily loves that idea, but I think he swallows it for what it is right now, lets it play out to the end of the season, and then go from there. And then, and then let his contract run out and then look for a new guy. I don't know if I see a lot of Tottenham supporters online saying, like, this shouldn't be something that you allow to be said in public like this. He should be let go, but then we get into a situation like Patrick Vieira being let go. And then for what reason? And then you see Palace just capitulate afterwards because like they had a terrible fixture list, going up until the moment when he was let go. Now, they played all the top sides. It's not like they were getting beaten 3-4, 5-0. They were pretty close games. If anything, 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, whatever the case. And this was right before they get, Leeds, Everton, Forest, all that. So it sometimes like it doesn't make sense. So I don't know if I know exactly. I'm going to take a Peter Schmeichel line. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't even want to give my opinion. But I do think he's going to see the rest of his contract out, mainly because they are still in the position where Tottenham feels comfortable being for next year, not necessarily a position where Conte feels comfortable that they're in.
Yeah, we should see if we can get like a Tottenham fan on the podcast tonight, because I would like to hear like what in general Tottenham fans feel, because as someone who is probably sick of not winning and always being in the run, isn't this always a good thing, even though it's probably an overdose of truth being injected into your bloodstream? But if you're a fan, I don't know, I would be like, this is what we fucking needed. Somebody finally is coming out and saying what should be said. And as an owner, obviously, you're not going to like it, but I wonder how fans feel. So we're going to have to do like a little survey. If you know a Spurs fan, get in touch with us. So maybe we can get them on the podcast and see what in general, or I'll look through some Tottenham message boards and see. But then again, I don't know how true that is. You look through some Facebook groups for Liverpool, and it's a shit show too. So I don't know what the general feeling is. I know they don't like the fact that Conte is constantly giving my bags are still packed, I can move anytime I want kind of a talk constantly. But at the same time, like, this conversation I felt was like totally different. So, okay, well, let's finish with, I don't know what the hell you have there, but let's finish with this either way.
This is just what I feel like inside Conte, what he really wanted to say.
There is no passion, there is no vision, there is no aggression, there is no fucking mindset in this football club. Nothing is there. What the hell is there in this football club? Tell me now. What the hell is...
Yeah. I don't know if anyone's seen that clip before, but that is a Chelsea supporter. That was after, oh God, I can't remember after which game it was. But yeah, it was pretty great.
Yeah, but I just loved watching that press conference. It just was like, I think it's because of the way the accents and the way he talks as well, and like the language barrier. Here's the thing, especially, anybody who has kind of like learned another language knows that, especially in the beginning stages, as you get angrier, it's really harder to put the words together and get, because you're kind of like too mad for like your brain is going like, until now. I've lived in the US a lot longer than I lived in Turkey. But I know when I first got here, when I was really pissed in traffic and stuff like that, I would swear in Turkish, because you go to your default settings when you're like really angry.
Yeah.
I think I've kind of like adjusted the default settings now, changed the whole BIOS, and I'm doing a lot better now. So
doing a lot better, or just doing it in English?
Doing it in English, not doing it in, but no. I'm still the same asshole. It's just switching languages has been a lot easier. The odd thing is now I almost find it difficult to switch to Turkish at times when we do the Turkish podcast with my brother. I constantly throw in English stuff in here and there where I don't even recognize it. So I probably look as like a snobby douchebag over there speaking.
Look at this guy born in the U.S. pretending to be Turkish.
Sparky Parky says I default to English. Is that like Scouse or is that like English? Which one?
Yeah,
Like,
I can strive to the to American is my default default language.
oh man. Well, Polish Prince, thanks as always. So yeah, you speak Polish though, right? By the way, we keep calling you the Polish Prince.
Wait, are you actually from there? Because I need to make sure. Yes.
Do you speak Polish fluent?
Yeah.
You swear in Polish.
Yeah.
When?
When I play sports sometimes, because then the refs don't really know what I'm saying.
Ah.
So
I've done that
sometimes
before,
it's more of just like a, hey, this is just for me. I don't want to get a technical right now. Because like yesterday, there was a moment where I was pretty upset and I didn't say anything in English and I just said some shit in Polish and nothing came of it. And I just went on.
When I played in London, when I was in college, yes, that was perfect because you could swear in Turkish, say whatever the hell you want, and you get away with it. I didn't do it on purpose. It was still, the default settings at the time for Turkish. So when you were really pissed off, you would start swearing in like Turkish and say stuff under your breath or above your breath, whatever. But then, yeah, it's funny like how that changes over time. But yeah, I wonder the Polish Prince going around the basketball court swearing.
Can't believe we haven't figured that one out.
Well, thanks a lot as always. Thanks to all those joining in, commenting, and sharing, and all that good stuff. I will be back tonight with the gang. I will probably look to get their feedback on this whole manager conversation because I think it's a different one because everyone wants something different from their manager as well. So let's see what I can almost imagine what Bickler would want. But I'll be interested to see actually what Galley would want because I don't know which side would he fall on, the professionalism or the one that's irate kind of thing. Does he want to manage to give a rant like he does, or do you want him to play the high road?
Do we want to do a prediction scoreboard right now for everyone? Yes, which manager Galley would like.
Well, we'll see you tonight then. It's 7:00 Central, 8:00 Eastern, live on our regular Monday podcast. Until then, take care, guys. Have a great week.